Canadian resources are removed from the global supply chain, you know who fills that gap? Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Russia. Well, all of these organizations and companies are getting their emissions down. Let's get emissions down and Canadian resources to market so that we can have jobs, opportunity, and fight climate change.
Mr. Singh.
When it comes to leadership on the fighting this essential crisis, one of the biggest crises we're up against, we've got a difficult choice for Canadians. You've got on one side someone who doesn't believe there's a crisis, and then on the other you got Mr. Trudeau who doesn't act like there's a crisis. And what it's going to take is real leadership. Because the solutions are there. We can invest in green energy, clean energy. We can invest in renewable energy.
Doesn't give up on tens of thousands of workers across the country.
We'll never give up on workers. We're
workers that are working hard for their families, so we can get our resources to market.
Okay, one at a time, gentlemen. Mr. O'Toole, then back to you, Mr. Singh.
Sure.
Mr. O'Toole, then Mr. Singh.
I want to see Canadians get back to work in all sectors and in all regions. And I'm proud of what we produce in our country, whether it's our resources or the resources in the heads of our young people.
But
we need to get emissions down,
Mr. O'Toole,
and get our energy to market.
These workers need a plan that's going to create jobs for the future. And that's a responsibility of government. We've seen 6 years of Mr. Trudeau, and workers can't afford another 4 years. What we need to do is invest in a diversified economy, clean energy. We need to electrify transportation. We need to invest in retrofitting homes and buildings. We need to create good jobs for workers now.
But we need an economic recovery in all sectors
that have failed workers.
Last word to you, Mr. Blanchet. Last word to you, sir.
Leadership is not only saying the words, it's proposing solutions, admitting a problem, which they're not doing.
All right, thank you. My next question is for all of you. We've had some encouraging news out of Kabul overnight with the escape of 43 Canadians. That said, thousands of people who helped Canada during Canada's mission in Afghanistan have been left behind in their hour of need, and it is unknown if we will ever get them all out. To each of you, what would you have done differently? Mr. O'Toole, per the draw, you begin.
Canada should never leave behind people that are at risk because they helped us. When Afghanistan was falling, there were 1,200 Canadians and hundreds more translators and others waiting for help from Canada. What did Mr. Trudeau do? You called an election, sir. You put your own political interests ahead of the well-being of thousands of people. Leadership is about putting others first, not yourself. Mr. Trudeau, you should not have called this election. You should have gotten the job done in Afghanistan.
Mr. O'Toole,
hold on. This is not open debate, leaders. This is a situation where we're asking a question to each of you. No problem, Mr. Trudeau. I'm trying to keep track myself.
I would like him, Ms. Curl, because he called an election in the fourth wave of a pandemic with fires in British Columbia and with unfinished business in Afghanistan,
All
Mr.
right,
Trudeau.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. I'm going to give the opportunity next per the draw to Mr. Singh. You guys will have tons of time to debate, so hang tight. Mr. Singh.
Sadly, what's happened in Afghanistan is a tragedy that was something we knew about. We knew about the withdrawal date. We knew from President Biden what that date would be. And sadly, I agree with Mr. O'Toole on this one point that it was a bad decision to call an election while this crisis was going on, particularly because we've got allies on the ground that put their lives at risk to support our Canadian forces who are now looking at peril for their lives and may never get out of Afghanistan. We know the impact on women and girls in Afghanistan. It's heartbreaking, and it could have been avoided. Veterans had told Mr. Trudeau and his government for a long time that the current approach was not working. Those calls were not heeded, and as a result, we're in this really horrible situation.
Thank you,
It could have
Mr.
been avoided.
Singh. Thank you, Mr. Singh. Mr. Blanchet.
First, good news. I seem to understand from what I read a few hours ago that Kabul airport is now being open for some people to get out of the country, which is very good news. This should have been worked a long, long time ago. I agree with Mr. O'Toole that Mr. Trudeau should have put those people's interest before his own. However, the problem is that Canada has failed many times to create some strong partnerships with other countries in order to be stronger facing a situation like Afghanistan now, because by itself, we must admit, Canada is not a world power.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchet. Mr. Trudeau, I invite you to respond now.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. It's unfortunate to hear the members, the leaders on this stage talking down the incredible work that our Canadian Armed Forces, that our diplomats, that our consular officials did from the beginning of the summer to ensure that as of the very beginning of August, well before this election, we